Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
You've handed us a really thought-provoking set of materials this time.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Articles, excerpts, even some visual data, all kind of exploring this collision of technology, AI, and the 2024 U.S. election.
Right.
We're talking John Borthwick's insights, the evolving media landscape, the whole works. And it feels like we're on the verge of some pretty massive shifts, wouldn't you say?
It does feel that way, doesn't it? And, as we head towards this election, critically examining these ideas, I think, is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Our choices, both individually and as a nation, are going to have a huge impact on the future.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that really jumped out from all this material is this idea that the internet, which was originally designed to be this super organized library of facts,
Right.
is kind of becoming too much of a good thing.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We've gone from information scarcity to information overload.
Right.
And as Borthwick points out, this has created a sense of perma-weird, this feeling of constant uncertainty and urgency.
It's like that feeling when you see two completely different interpretations of the same crime statistics, depending on who's presenting them. It makes you wonder which version is even close to reality.
Exactly. This abundance of information, often without much context, can be easily manipulated to fit different narratives.
Yeah.
And for you, as someone trying to make sense of it all,
Right.
it raises a really important question. How do we even begin to establish a shared understanding of truth when we're constantly bombarded with so many different versions of it, especially online?
Yeah, it's almost like the very structure of the internet is changing too, right?
Right.
Borthwick talks about the rise of the synthetic internet,
Right.
where so much of what we encounter online is actually AI generated.
Right.
I mean, the idea that some of those people we interact with might be bots is kind of mind-blowing
Yeah.
and kind of creepy.
It is a bit unsettling, isn't it? And if you think about it, we might be interacting with bots more than we realize, especially on social media. Borthwick even uses the example of all the pet content online,
Yeah.
suggesting that a lot of it could be AI generated, which, if you think about it, could be a subtle indicator of how much of the internet is becoming synthetic.
So we're not just talking about fake news anymore. It's like
Yeah.
the whole online environment is becoming more and more artificial. But then Borthwick also talks about emerging intelligences, which seems to be a more nuanced way of looking at AI.
Right.
It's not just about robots taking over,
Yeah.
but about different types of AI working with us, augmenting our abilities.
Right.
Like, remember that story he tells about AlphaGo's move Son of 7?
Yes, that's a great example of how AI can push human creativity and understanding forward.
Yeah.
Move 37, it was this completely unexpected move that no human Go player had ever considered.
Right.
And what's fascinating is that after seeing AlphaGo play this move, human players started incorporating similar strategies into their own games,
Wow.
elevating the level of play overall.
It's like AI showed us a whole new way of thinking about the game, which makes you wonder if it can do that with something as complex as Go. What other areas could it revolutionize?
Yeah?
I mean, just imagine the possibilities in medicine art science.
It's truly mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And it completely challenges the idea that AI is just about replacing human intelligence.
Right.
Instead, it suggests that AI can be this incredible tool for exploration and innovation, helping us to see the world in new ways.
Okay, but here's where things get a little darker.
Yeah.
Borthwick also talks about the potential for AI to manipulate our understanding of history. Like the way he analyzes that podcast interview where the host uses a selectively curated history book to present a completely different perspective on World War II.
Right.
It's chilling to think how easily information can be twisted.
It is a concerning thought. Think about the power of AI to create deepfakes and weave alternative narratives.
Right.
What if those tools fall into the wrong hands?
Yeah.
It could completely rewrite the past in ways that serve particular agendas.
Right.
And for you, as someone consuming information, it really raises the stakes. How do we know what to trust when even history can be manipulated?
That's a great question. And Borthwick doesn't shy away from connecting all of this directly to the upcoming election.
Right.
He even calls it a crossroads.
Yeah.
He points out those contrasting viewpoints from Silicon Valley leaders, with some wholeheartedly backing a particular candidate, while others seem genuinely concerned about the future of technology under their leadership.
Right. And it's interesting how Borthwick explores both sides, digging into the motivations and potential consequences. He argues that whoever wins this election will have a huge influence on how these technologies are developed and regulated,
Yeah.
shaping the balance of power in this new world order that's emerging.
It's a lot to consider as you head to the polls, right?
It is.
And then there's this whole dark enlightenment concept that Borthwick brings up,
Right.
which, to be honest, is a little unsettling.
Uh-huh.
This philosophy, which seems to be gaining traction among some tech folks, advocates for a return to traditional hierarchies and a rejection of, well, a lot of the values that we might consider progressive.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea.
Yeah.
Especially in the context of all this rapid technological advancement. Borthwick seems to be particularly worried that some individuals might be looking to control and direct AI in ways that could create a very different type of society. Maybe even something like a techno-feudalist system.
So rather than technology bringing us together, it could actually be used to create even deeper divisions and inequalities.
Yes, the fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really underscores the importance of understanding these trends and engaging with them critically.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the future isn't preordained. It's something we create through the choices we make today.
Well, that's a lot to take in. But before we get too overwhelmed,
Right.
let's move on to the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
You know, one thing that really struck me is how much the media landscape itself has changed even since the last election.
It really has. It's almost unrecognizable from just a few years ago. And it's definitely playing a huge role in shaping the way we experience this election, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. It's like trying to navigate a completely different world. And speaking of navigating, one thing that stood out to me from all these materials is how Borthwick weaves together these seemingly separate ideas of technology, history, media politics.
Right.
It's like he's showing us how deeply connected they all really are.
He does a great job of that. And it's that interconnectedness, I think, that makes understanding these trends so crucial. We can't afford to look at these issues in isolation anymore.
Right.
For example, the way he ties that perma-weird feeling
Right.
to the rise of the synthetic internet and the erosion of a shared reality is incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
It suggests that our very perception of the world is being reshaped by these technological forces.
So it's not just about being overwhelmed with information. It's about how that overload makes us question what's real, what's true, what we can even believe anymore.
Right.
And in that kind of environment, it feels like it would be so easy for people to manipulate us, to sow division and distrust.
Exactly. And that's why his analysis of the Dark Enlightenment is so unsettling.
Yeah.
It's not just some abstract philosophy, it's a worldview that's actually gaining traction among people who have the power to shape this technological revolution.
Right.
And if their goal is control and hierarchy, well, that has some pretty scary implications for the future of democracy.
It does feel like we're at a turning point, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, Borthwick even draws a parallel between the current moment and the period leading up to World War II.
Yeah.
He talks about how the rise of fascism was fueled by a similar mix of technological disruption, economic anxiety, and this yearning for a simpler, more authoritarian past.
It's a sobering comparison, and he's not the only one making that connection.
Right.
Historians and political scientists are increasingly warning about how fragile democratic institutions can be, especially in the face of these kinds of challenges.
Which brings us right back to this election.
Yeah.
And Borthwick definitely doesn't hold back when it comes to his opinions on the candidates.
Right.
It seems pretty clear that he sees Kamala Harris as offering a more hopeful path forward.
He does seem to admire her approach. He portrays her as someone who really understands the complexities of the challenges we're facing and is committed to finding solutions that work for everyone.
He contrasts that with her opponent, who he seems to view as much more divisive and potentially authoritarian.
Right. He suggests that there's a very clear choice here. A choice between a path towards cooperation and progress and one that risks sliding towards chaos and conflict.
It's not just about policies. It's about two completely different visions for America.
Right.
And I think Borthwick is urging us to think really carefully about which vision we want to see become a reality. Speaking of different visions, he spends a lot of time discussing the transformation of the internet, especially the rise of what he calls the synthetic internet.
Yes, and it's not just about the amount of information we're bombarded with, but the nature of that information. With AI generating more and more content, it's becoming harder to distinguish between what's real and what's not. And that has huge implications for how we form our beliefs, how we make decisions, even how we connect with each other online.
It makes you wonder, are we losing something essential about human interaction in this increasingly synthetic environment?
Right.
Borthwick uses the example of pet content.
Yeah.
Again, suggesting that all those cute animal pictures and videos might be a sign of just how much of our online experience is now being shaped by algorithms and AI.
It's a subtle but really profound point, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's not saying that all AI-generated content is bad,
Right.
but he is raising questions about authenticity and the potential for manipulation. It's like, are we becoming so accustomed to this curated synthetic world
Right.
that we're losing our ability to discern what's genuine?
And maybe even losing our ability to think critically about the information we're consuming.
It could.
Borthwick mentions that even his own writing has become more fragmented, more associated, almost like a reflection of the way information is presented to us online.
It's a fascinating observation. He seems to be suggesting that the tools we use are actually changing the way we think.
Yeah.
And that raises the question, is that change for the better or for worse?
It's a question worth pondering, for sure. And it reminds me of that other intriguing idea. Borthwick explores the concept of emerging intelligences.
Right.
This goes beyond just AI as a tool and delves into the possibility that AI is evolving in ways we don't fully comprehend.
It's like we might be creating something that is fundamentally different from us, something that operates according to its own logic.
Yeah.
And might even surpass our own intelligence in certain areas. He uses the example of AlphaGo's move 37 to illustrate this point.
Right. That move, which no human player had ever considered, suggests that AI might be exploring possibilities beyond our current understanding.
Right.
It's both fascinating and a little bit unnerving, right? Yeah. Like, what happens when we create something that we don't fully understand? Something that can outthink us?
It definitely raises some big questions about the future of humanity and our relationship with technology. Borthwick doesn't shy away from exploring the potential downsides of this evolving intelligence. He even talks about how AI could be used to rewrite history.
Yes. He analyzes a podcast interview where the host uses a selectively curated history book to present a completely different perspective on World War II.
Yay.
It's a chilling reminder of how easily history can be manipulated.
It is.
Especially with the power of AI to create deepfakes and generate convincing fake content.
And it becomes even more unsettling when you think about Borthwick's personal experience with his aunt, who had been a nurse at Dachau after World War II.
Oh, wow.
He found pictures she had taken inside Hitler's prison cell and realized how easily those images could be used to create alternative histories, even to deny the Holocaust. It really highlights the fragility of truth and the importance of safeguarding historical accuracy.
Absolutely. And he brings it back to the present by emphasizing how the next president will play a huge role in shaping how these technologies are developed.
Yeah.
It's like we're at a fork in the road, and the direction we choose will have profound implications for the future.
He highlights the contrasting views within Silicon Valley, with some advocating for a hands-off approach to AI development,
Right.
while others are pushing for stricter regulations and ethical guidelines.
Yeah.
It's a debate that's going to have a huge impact on all of us.
It feels like we're being asked to decide what kind of future we want to live in. Right?
Yeah.
One where technology empowers us or one where it controls us. And Borthwick seems to be warning us against a particular vision of the future. This idea of a techno-feudalist society.
He paints a pretty bleak picture of what that might look like, a society where a small elite controls all the levers of power and technology is used to reinforce existing hierarchies and inequalities. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a future we want to avoid, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And he seems to be suggesting that the ideology of the Dark Enlightenment is pushing us towards that dystopian vision.
He describes it as a worldview that embraces hierarchy control and a rejection of individual liberty. It's an ideology that seems fundamentally at odds with the principles of an open and democratic society.
And Borthwick sees figures like J.D. Vance as representing this post-liberal, right? A movement that seems to be gaining momentum and pushing for a more authoritarian approach to governance.
And it's a trend that's happening all over the world, not just in America.
Right. It seems like we're seeing a global shift towards more authoritarian forms of government, and technology is playing a key role in that shift. So what can we do about it? What's the alternative to this slide towards techno-feudalism and authoritarianism? Borthwick offers a different path forward, one that he calls muddling through.
He acknowledges that there are no easy answers to the complex challenges we face, but he believes that by embracing incremental progress, collaboration, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes, we can navigate this uncharted territory and create a better future.
So it's not about finding the perfect solution. It's about constantly adapting and evolving, right? Being willing to experiment and adjust our course as we go.
Exactly. It's a more humble approach, recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that the future is something we create together through trial and error. Borthwick seems to be arguing for a more nuanced and pragmatic approach to progress.
And maybe a more hopeful one, too, right? And he ends with that incredibly powerful quote from David Graeber. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently.
It's a reminder that we have agency, that we're not just passive bystanders in this technological revolution.
Yeah.
We have the power to shape the future,
Yeah.
but only if we're willing to engage with these challenges and make conscious choices about the world we want to create.
So in a way, it's a call to action, right?
It is.
A challenge to each of us to step up and play a role in shaping this new world that's emerging. And it's not just about technology. It's about our values, our beliefs, our vision for the future.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that technology is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill. It's up to us to decide how we want to wield that power and what kind of future we want to build with it.
I think that's such an important point to make. And Borthwick doesn't just leave us with a warning. He also points to reasons for hope, doesn't he? Like he talks about America's superpower being its resilience, its ability to reinvent itself.
He points to historical examples like the post-World War II era and the period following the 2008 financial crisis. He argues that America has faced seemingly insurmountable challenges before and emerged stronger each time.
And he believes we can do it again.
Yeah.
Right? We can harness these new technologies to create a more just and equitable future. We just need to make the right choices, which brings us back to this idea of muddling through.
It might not sound glamorous, but he argues that it's a realistic and historically grounded approach to navigating these uncharted waters.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from information overload to the rise of synthetic intelligence. From the potential manipulation of history to the contrasting visions for America's future. And now it seems like we're heading into the final stretch of our deep dive, where we'll really unpack the significance of the 2024 election. Are you ready to tackle that?
Ready and a little bit nervous, honestly. It feels like the stakes have never been higher, especially with all this talk about the potential for technology to reshape our world in such dramatic ways.
It's true, we are at a pivotal moment, but remember, even amidst all this uncertainty, Borthwick emphasizes that the future isn't predetermined. It's something we actively create through the choices we make.
And that's where the 2024 election comes in. It's not just about picking a president, it's about deciding what kind of future we want to build. And Borthwick doesn't shy away from sharing his own views on who he thinks is best suited for the job, right?
He definitely has a strong opinion. He makes a compelling case for Kamala Harris, portraying her as a leader who understands the complexities of these issues and has the experience and vision to navigate this new landscape. He seems particularly drawn to her focus on collaboration and finding common ground, which feels very much aligned with that muddling through approach he talks about.
Yes, and he contrasts her approach with that of her opponent, who he sees as representing a more divisive and potentially dangerous path, especially when it comes to how technology is used and regulated.
He's especially wary of that whole techno-feudalist scenario, where a small elite control all the power and technology is used to reinforce existing inequalities.
Yeah.
It's like dystopian sci-fi movie come to life.
It's a chilling vision, and one that he believes we need to actively resist. He sees this election as a chance to choose a different path, one that leads towards greater equity and opportunity for all.
And it's not just about domestic policy. Borthwick is also concerned about America's role in the world, particularly in light of these technological shifts. He seems to be calling for a return to a more engaged and cooperative approach to foreign policy, one that leverages America's strengths to address global challenges.
He's critical of the isolationist tendencies that have emerged in recent years, arguing that America's true power lies in its ability to build bridges and foster collaboration on a global scale. He seems to believe that by embracing this interconnected world and working with other nations, we can actually shape a more positive future for everyone.
It's like he's challenging us to reclaim that spirit of innovation and optimism that has always been at the heart of the American story, to see these challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities to build a better world.
Exactly. And it's a message that feels incredibly relevant right now in this moment of uncertainty and upheaval. It's a reminder that we have the power to shape our own destiny, but it requires courage, vision, and a willingness to work together. And it's about recognizing that the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create through our actions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we all have a role to play in shaping this future. It's about how we engage with these technologies, how we challenge the status quo, and how we work together to create a world that reflects our values and aspirations.
Beautifully said. And remember that quote from David Graeber. The ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently. Let's choose to make it a world worth living in, a world that embraces progress, fosters connection, and empowers everyone to thrive.
That's a perfect note to end. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep questioning everything.